The prenuptial agreement my husband forgot he signed 25 years ago just cost him $12 million and his reputation. After decades of being told I contributed nothing to our marriage, my husband chose our family Thanksgiving to announce his new life with his secretary. The manila envelope I handed him that night contained evidence that would destroy everything he'd built on my invisible labor. I'm Sarah Thompson, 48 years old, and this is how I turned the worst betrayal of my life into the most expensive lesson my ex-husband ever learned. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. 25 years of marriage doesn't prepare you for the moment. Your husband looks at your children and says he's selling their childhood home for his pregnant mistress. I met Mark Thompson in 1999 when I was a marketing manager at a Fortune 500 company, and he was a struggling real estate agent with big dreams. I remember the exact moment I decided to give up my career. It was when he looked at me with tears in his eyes after losing another deal and said, "Sarah, I can't do this without you. If you could just handle things at home for a few years, I promise I'll build us an empire." Those few years turned into 25. I raised our 3 children, Emily, Michael, and David, essentially alone, while Mark worked 80-hour weeks. I managed every school event, every doctor's appointment, every birthday party. When Emily had appendicitis at 2 a.m., I drove her to the hospital while Mark was in Tokyo closing a deal. When Michael was diagnosed with dyslexia, I spent months researching specialists and tutoring programs while Mark reminded me that, "At least you have time for these things since you don't work." "You don't work, Sarah." That became his favorite phrase. He'd say it casually at dinner parties when people asked what I did. Sarah doesn't work. She's lucky enough to focus on the family while I handle the real responsibilities. The house I didn't work to maintain was featured in Architectural Digest. The children I didn't work to raise all graduated with honors. The dinner parties I didn't work to host landed Mark 3 of his biggest clients. But somehow, none of that counted as contribution. By year 20, I'd stopped correcting him. By year 23, I'd almost started believing him myself. It's amazing how slowly someone can erase you, one dismissive comment at a time, until you're just a ghost managing their life from the shadows. The first sign something was wrong came 6 months before that Thanksgiving dinner. Mark had always been meticulous about his appearance, but suddenly there was a new cologne, something younger, sharper than his usual Tom Ford. When I mentioned it, he laughed. "Maybe if you paid attention to yourself the way Jessica does, you'd notice I've been wearing this for months." Jessica Rivera, his new executive assistant, 28 years old, with an MBA from Wharton that she somehow never used except to fetch his coffee and arrange his calendar. I'd met her at the company summer picnic. She'd worn a dress so tight that Margaret Chen, one of the senior partners' wives, had whispered, "That's not an outfit, it's a hunting strategy." The late meeting started in July. Board discussions that somehow required dinner at restaurants I'd never heard of, in neighborhoods 40 minutes from his office. His phone, which used to sit carelessly on the kitchen counter, suddenly required a new passcode. When I asked why, he said, "Company security protocol, sensitive information, you wouldn't understand." One night in August, I was doing laundry when a credit card fell from his jacket pocket, a platinum Amex I'd never seen before, in his name alone. The statement address was his office, not our home. I put it back exactly where I'd found it and said nothing, but I took a photo first. That photo would become Exhibit C in our divorce proceedings. The moment I knew for certain was when he came home from a client meeting with a hickey poorly hidden by concealer. He'd been too arrogant to check his neck in proper lighting. When our daughter Emily noticed it at breakfast and joked about Dad's weird rash, he actually blushed. The morning after I found that credit card, I did something I'd never done in 25 years of marriage. I looked through Mark's iPad while he showered. What I found made my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped it. Messages to Jay about our future and Nanital once I handle the situation at home. The situation, that's what our marriage had become to him. I screenshot everything and sent it to a new email account I created just for this purpose. Then I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I smiled at breakfast and asked Mark about his day like nothing had changed. That afternoon, I called Margaret Smith, the divorce attorney who'd handled my friend Linda's case. Margaret had a reputation for being ruthless, brilliant, and expensive. When I told her my situation, she asked one question that changed everything. "Sarah, before we proceed, Do you have a prenuptial agreement? I almost laughed. Mark would never have signed one. He was broke when we married. Check anyway, Margaret said. You'd be surprised what people forget they signed 25 years ago, especially if they were eager to marry someone who was out-earning them 3-1 at the time. That night, I went through our safe deposit box while Mark was at another late meeting. Behind our life insurance policies and the kids' birth certificates, I found a manila folder labeled Wedding Documents. Inside was our marriage certificate, the receipt for my engagement ring that cost less than my monthly salary back then, and a 15-page document titled Prenuptial Agreement. My heart stopped. There it was, Mark's signature next to mine, dated 3 weeks before our wedding. The clause that would destroy him was on page 7. In the event of infidelity, the unfaithful party forfeits 70% of marital assets. I needed help, and it came from the most unexpected source, our daughter Emily. She'd noticed the tension and cornered me one evening while Mark was traveling. Mom, I know something's wrong. I'm a forensic accountant. Let me help. I broke down and told her everything. Instead of the shock I expected, Emily's face hardened with the determination I recognized as my own from decades ago. I've suspected for months, she said. His expense reports don't match his calendar. Mom, you need to see what I found in Dad's corporate filings. What Emily discovered made the infidelity seem almost quaint. 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, systematic transfers totaling $8.5 million, and a paper trail of shell companies that all led back to Mark. He'd been preparing to leave me for years, moving assets where he thought I'd never find them. This is wire fraud, Mom, Emily said quietly, and tax evasion. The IRS would be very interested in this. Margaret Smith assembled our team like a general preparing for war. Beyond Emily's financial forensics, she brought in a private investigator named James Rodriguez, who specialized in corporate espionage cases. Within 2 weeks, James had photos of Mark and Jessica at the Ritz-Carlton, recordings from the restaurant where Mark had stupidly requested his favorite private dining room, the one that happened to be next to an outlet where James could legally place a recording device in the public hallway. The recording was damning. Mark's voice clear as day. She's just a stupid housewife. 25 years and she still thinks I'm working late. Once I move the last million offshore, I'll file for divorce, and she'll get nothing. The prenup, please. My lawyer says those things never hold up after this long. Mom, you need to see what I found in Dad's offshore accounts. November 23rd, 2024. Thanksgiving at the Thompson house was an institution. 22 family members, Mark's business partners, and closest friends gathered in our dining room that could have been featured in Better Homes and Gardens. I'd spent 3 days preparing, just like every year, while Mark complained about the cost of organic turkeys. He arrived an hour late, phone buzzing constantly. Jessica needs the quarterly reports, he said, not meeting my eyes. The irony wasn't lost on me, making his mistress work on Thanksgiving while his wife served dinner to his family. I'd positioned everyone strategically. Mark's mother, Eleanor, sat where she'd have a clear view of his face. My brother, Tom, a court reporter, was directly across from Mark. Emily sat next to me, her phone recording in her pocket, legal, in our one-party consent state. Mark seemed unusually excited, almost giddy. He'd brought a bottle of 1996 Chateau d'Yquem, worth about $3,000. For a special occasion, he announced, winking at his brother Robert, who managed his company's legal affairs. As I served the turkey, perfectly golden, rosemary-infused, the way Mark's mother had taught me, I watched my husband of 25 years check his phone and smile at whatever Jessica had sent. My hands were steady as I set down the platter. 22 people around our table, and he couldn't even pretend to care about the family we'd built. Before we eat, Mark said, standing up with his wine glass, I have an announcement that will change everything. My mother-in-law reached for her heart medication, thinking he was about to announce a grandchild or a business triumph. Our son Michael recorded on his phone, expecting good news to share with his girlfriend, who couldn't make it. They had no idea what was coming. I want everyone to know that I've made a decision about my future, Mark began, his voice carrying that CEO confidence that once made me fall in love with him. Life is too short to live unhappily, and I deserve to be with someone who appreciates me, who understands my vision, who actually contributes to my success. The room was silent. My sister-in-law Karen slowly put down her fork. Sarah and I will be divorcing, he continued as casually as if announcing a change in Thanksgiving menu. I've found someone who truly gets me. Jessica Rivera, some of you have met her at company events. She's brilliant, young, ambitious, everything a man in my position needs. My mother-in-law's gasp was audible. Our son David stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Jessica's pregnant, Mark added, smiling like he'd announced a promotion. And her 2 kids from her previous relationship need a proper home. So yes, I'll be selling this house. Jessica has her eye on something bigger in Westchester, more modern, less tired. 25 years of marriage reduced to a real estate transaction. Our daughter Emily's hand found mine under the table, squeezing hard. Dad, what the fuck? Michael's voice cracked. He was 22, still young enough to believe in family. Language, son, Mark said patronizingly. You'll understand when you're older. Sometimes people grow apart. Your mother and I, well, she's a wonderful homemaker, but I need an equal partner. Someone who understands the business world, who can contribute more than just domestic skills. That's when I stood up. Slowly, deliberately, my grandmother's pearl necklace catching the light from the chandelier I'd chosen 15 years ago. Since you're making announcements, Mark, I have one too. I walked to my purse, each step measured, controlled. The dining room erupted before I could reach my purse. David threw his wine glass against the wall, the Waterford crystal shattering like our family. You brought us here to humiliate Mom? On Thanksgiving? Mark's mother, Eleanor, stood up shakily, her 78-year-old frame trembling with rage. You disgust me, she told her son. Your father would be spinning in his grave. That woman, she pointed at me, gave up everything for you. Everything. Mom, you don't understand modern relationships. Mark started, but his brother Robert cut him off. I understand you're announcing your affair at a family dinner like some kind of sociopath, Robert said quietly. His wife was already gathering their children, whispering urgently about leaving. My brother Tom had his phone out, texting rapidly, probably to his lawyer friends, already thinking 3 steps ahead. My sister Maria was crying, but they were angry tears, the kind that promised retribution. How long? Emily asked, her voice deadly calm. How long have you been sleeping with her while Mom cooked your meals and raised your children? That's not relevant. 8 months, I said clearly, returning with the manila envelope. 8 months, 3 days, to be precise. The Ritz-Carlton charges started on March 20th. The room went silent again. Mark's face flushed. You went through my things. Our things, I corrected. In our marriage, which is still legally binding, by the way. Karen laughed bitterly. Jessica's pregnant? Let me guess. She told you right after you mentioned divorce? Mark's jaw tightened. That was exactly what had happened. I could see it in his eyes. Since you're making announcements, I repeated, holding up the envelope, I have something for you too. I handed Mark the envelope with the same grace I'd used serving dinner for 25 years. Since you're concerned about proper documentation, I thought you should have this. His hands were steady as he opened it, still the confident CEO, still certain he controlled the room. That certainty lasted exactly 3 seconds. I watched his face change as he read the first document, the prenuptial agreement with key sections highlighted in yellow by Margaret Smith. His signature, notarized and witnessed, dated January 15th, 1999. This is, he started, then stopped. Page 7 is particularly interesting, I said conversationally, as if discussing a recipe. The infidelity clause, 70% of marital assets to the faithful spouse. You insisted on that, actually. You were so worried I might cheat with someone from my old company. The second document made him sink into his chair. Screenshots of wire transfers to the Cayman Islands, each one meticulously traced by Emily, with annotations showing the tax implications. The IRS received copies yesterday, I mentioned. Margaret says they were very interested. The third item was a USB drive labeled simply, March 20th, November 15th. That's 8 months of surveillance footage and audio recordings, I explained to our silent audience. All legally obtained in public spaces and common areas. James Rodriguez is very thorough. Your voice is quite clear discussing how you plan to hide assets from your stupid housewife. Eleanor made a sound between a sob and a laugh. You knew? All this time you knew? 6 months, I confirmed. I've known for 6 months. I wanted to be thorough. Margaret Smith says preparation is everything in divorce proceedings. You might want to call your lawyer, Mark, I added, sitting back down to my cooling turkey. Tonight. I need to pause here and take you back 6 months to show you exactly how a stupid housewife prepared for war. But first, if you're finding value in this story about standing up for yourself after betrayal, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I share real stories of justice and empowerment every week. Also, let me know in the comments, have you ever had to gather evidence to protect yourself? Your experiences matter, and you're not alone. Now, let me tell you how I discovered the depth of Mark's deception. 6 months earlier, May 2024. After finding those text messages, I hired James Rodriguez on Margaret's recommendation. He's expensive, she warned, but he's worth every penny. James was a former FBI agent who looked like someone's grandfather. Completely forgettable until he opened his mouth and laid out a surveillance plan like a military operation. We stay completely legal, he emphasized. Public spaces, one-party consent recordings where you're present, publicly available documents. No hacking, no trespassing, no illegal recordings. The first week, he followed Mark to 3 client dinners that were actually romantic rendezvous with Jessica at hotels across the city. The Ritz-Carlton had particularly good lighting in their lobby. The photos were crystal clear, Mark's hand on Jessica's lower back, her lips on his neck. But the audio was the real gold. Mark liked to conduct business calls in his car, forgetting that when he used the valet service at restaurants, he was in a public space for those crucial minutes. James had perfectly legal recordings of Mark on speakerphone with his attorney, discussing how to minimize Sarah's take and move assets quietly. She's just a stupid housewife, Mark laughed in one recording from June. 25 years and she still believes I'm working late. Once I file, she'll probably be grateful for whatever I offer. She has no idea what I'm actually worth. His actual worth, according to the documents Emily was uncovering, was $42 million. Not the $15 million he'd been claiming on tax returns. The discrepancy would interest several federal agencies. He's sloppy, James told me after a month of surveillance. Arrogant men always are. He thinks you're too stupid to catch him, so he's not even trying to hide it well. Emily worked nights and weekends tracing Mark's financial web, and what she found was staggering. Mom, Dad's been planning this for 3 years, she told me over coffee in June, sliding a folder across the table. These offshore accounts were opened in 2021, right after he got that Chinese investment deal. The Chinese investors? That was a revelation. Mark had told me he'd rejected their offer because it felt ethically questionable. In reality, he'd taken $12 million in cash, routed through shell companies in Delaware and Nevada before landing in the Cayman Islands. This is criminal, Mom, Emily said quietly. Wire fraud, tax evasion, possibly violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. We're not talking about divorce court anymore. This is federal prison territory. I stared at the spreadsheets, each transaction highlighted and annotated in Emily's precise handwriting. 25 years of marriage, and I was married to a criminal. There's more, Emily continued. Jessica Rivera isn't just his secretary. She's listed as a consultant for 3 of his shell companies, pulling in $30,000 a month for services that don't exist. He's been paying for her lifestyle with company funds, calling it business expenses. The irony was perfect. While Mark accused me of contributing nothing, he was literally paying his mistress for fictional work. Mom, there's something else. Emily pulled out another document. Dad incorporated a new company last month, Thompson Futures LLC. Guess who's listed as the sole beneficiary if something happens to him? Not his wife of 25 years, not his 3 children. Jessica Rivera, who he'd known for less than a year, a sin. We need to move fast, Emily said. His lawyer is David Sterling. If Dad files first, he'll try to freeze assets and claim you're making false accusations out of spite. The prenuptial agreement discovery was pure luck, or maybe fate. Margaret Smith had insisted on reviewing every document from our marriage, even ones I thought were irrelevant. You never know what might matter, she said. I'd forgotten about the prenup completely. When Mark proposed in 1998, I was making $90,000 a year while he was struggling to sell starter homes. His mother, Eleanor, had actually insisted on the prenup to protect me. I found it, Margaret called me on a humid July afternoon. Sarah, this is ironclad, drafted by Richardson and Associates. They're the best in the business. Your mother-in-law paid for it herself. The document was beautiful in its simplicity. 15 pages of protection that Mark had signed eagerly, probably never imagining he'd be the one to violate its terms. The infidelity clause was brutal. 70% of all marital assets to the faithful spouse, plus full custody rights and mandatory support payments calculated at 40% of the unfaithful party's gross income. "There's a kicker," Margaret said, barely containing her glee. Page 12, Section 8B, if the unfaithful party attempts to hide assets or commit financial fraud during the marriage, they forfeit all rights to marital property, everything. Would that hold up? I asked, my heart pounding. Richardson and Associates have never lost a prenup enforcement case in 40 years. Mark's signature is notarized, witnessed by 2 attorneys, and the document was filed with the state. It's bulletproof. The best part? In New York, prenups are matters of public record if filed properly. Mark's attorney, David Sterling, would have found it eventually, but by then, we'd have already struck. "When do we tell him?" I asked Margaret. "We don't," she smiled. "We let him hang himself first. The more he lies in court, the worse it gets." By September, Margaret had assembled what she called the nuclear option. 63 pieces of evidence, each one documented, verified, and legally obtained. The surveillance footage, the financial records, the prenup, and something unexpected, affidavits from 2 former employees. Mark sexually harassed me for 2 years. Jennifer Walsh told me over a recorded Zoom call that Margaret arranged. He promised me a promotion if I kept quiet, threatened to destroy my career if I didn't. I have emails, texts, and recordings. Sandra Martinez had a similar story. He told me I could be special like Jessica if I played my cards right. When I refused, he had me transferred to the Detroit office. These women had been afraid to speak up before, but knowing Mark was about to face justice changed everything. They wanted to be part of his downfall. Margaret filed our divorce papers strategically on November 1st, but had them held for service. "We'll serve him when it matters most, chickies," she said. "Maximum impact, maximum witnesses." We also filed for immediate asset freezing based on the evidence of fraud. The judge, Patricia Williams, reviewed our evidence in chambers and granted a temporary restraining order on all major asset transfers. Mark wouldn't know until he tried to move money. "There's one more thing," Margaret said the week before Thanksgiving. "The IRS investigation's already underway. Agent Martinez will be at the courthouse when we need him." I spent those last weeks before Thanksgiving in a strange state of calm. Every night, I cooked Mark's favorite meals, asked about his day, played the perfect wife. He had no idea that I'd already withdrawn my half of our liquid assets, legally, with Margaret's guidance, and placed them in a trust for our children. "We strike at Thanksgiving," Margaret confirmed. "Maximum witnesses, maximum impact." 3 days after Thanksgiving, Mark came home with David Sterling, his attorney, a silver-haired shark who'd supposedly never lost a high-asset divorce. They sat in my living room like they owned it, Sterling's briefcase positioned like a weapon on my coffee table. "Mrs. Thompson," Sterling began, his voice dripping condescension, "your little stunt at Thanksgiving was unfortunate. Mental health issues can make people do desperate things." There it was. Mark's strategy. Paint me as unstable. "Your husband tells me you suffered a nervous breakdown 10 years ago," Sterling continued. "Hospitalization, medication, the works. That kind of instability. Judges take it very seriously in asset division cases." I sipped my tea calmly. "I had postpartum depression after a miscarriage, Mr. Sterling. I sought help, got treatment, and recovered. It's all documented." "Still," Sterling smiled coldly, "a pattern of mental instability combined with this obvious paranoid delusion about hidden assets and affairs." "Delusion?" I set down my teacup. "Would you like to see the photos from the Ritz-Carlton? Or perhaps hear the recordings of Mark discussing his stupid housewife with Jessica?" Mark's face darkened. "Those were illegally obtained, inadmissible." "Actually," I replied, "James Rodriguez is a licensed private investigator. Everything was gathered in public spaces or with single-party consent, which is legal in New York. Margaret Smith can explain the specifics if you'd like." Sterling shifted tactics. "Your daughter illegally accessed private financial records. Corporate espionage is a federal crime." "Emily used publicly available SEC filings and court records," I corrected. Financial forensics is her job, Mr. Sterling. She's very good at it. We'll bury you in court, Mark snarled, dropping his pretense. I have resources you can't imagine. You mean the $8.5 million in the Cayman Islands? I asked innocently. Or the Thompson Futures LLC assets? The doorbell rang at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday in early December. Jessica Rivera stood on my porch, designer heels sinking into the welcome mat I'd bought last spring. She looked younger up close, scared beneath her carefully applied makeup. We need to talk, she said, glancing nervously behind her. Mark doesn't know I'm here. I let her in. Margaret had advised me to record everything, and my home security system was already running. Jessica sat on the edge of my sofa, the same spot where Mark had promised to destroy me days earlier. He's not leaving you, she blurted out. The divorce talk was just to scare you into accepting a smaller settlement. His lawyer told him to file first, claim abandonment, hide the money before you could react. I stayed silent, letting her talk. I'm pregnant, she continued, tears starting to smear her mascara. But so is Sandra from accounting, and Jennifer from Dallas is saying Mark promised to marry her too. The mistress wasn't the only mistress, of course. He told me you were crazy, Jessica said, that you'd been institutionalized, that you were abusive, that he stayed for the children. I believed him until I saw those court documents you filed, the prenup. He never mentioned a prenup. What do you want, Jessica? I want out, she said simply. But I need help. I have emails, texts, recordings of him promising me things. He said he'd put me in his will, make me CFO, set up trust funds for my kids. All lies. She pulled out her phone, showing me message after message. Mark's promises, each one dated and documented. Evidence of him using company funds for their affair, discussing tax evasion, planning to frame me for embezzlement if needed. Help me, she said, and I'll help you bury him. There's something else, Jessica said, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her phone. Mark told me about your breakdown. He said you tried to hurt yourself after losing the baby. I felt my chest tighten. 10 years ago, after my 4th miscarriage, I'd spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric facility for severe depression. It was the darkest period of my life, and Mark had used it as a weapon ever since. He has your medical records, Jessica continued. He paid someone at the hospital to get them. He was planning to use them to get full custody of David if you fought the divorce, claim you're an unfit mother. The cruelty took my breath away. I'd lost a baby, sought help, recovered, and raised 3 beautiful children. And he wanted to weaponize my grief. But here's what Mark doesn't know, Jessica said, pulling up another file. I recorded him talking about bribing the hospital employee. It's a federal crime. HIPAA violation, conspiracy, wire fraud since he paid electronically. She played the recording. Mark's voice, clear and arrogant. 5,000 should be enough. Get me everything from her psych stay. Every pill, every therapy note, every crying breakdown. I want her to look like a lunatic in court. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I'm not the villain here, Jessica said, tears flowing freely now. I'm 28, pregnant, and just realized I'm in love with a monster who's been lying to everyone. You're not crazy, Sarah. You're the sanest person in this mess. I made a decision. Give me the recording. Margaret will know what to do with it. Jessica handed over her phone. There's more, so much more. Mark's been doing this for years. Jennifer, Sandra, Amy from the Singapore office. We have a group chat now. We call ourselves Mark's Mistakes. The next morning, Margaret's office felt like a war room. Jessica's evidence spread across the conference table, my lawyer's eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. This changes everything, Margaret said. HIPAA violations are federal, 10 years in prison, minimum. Combined with the tax evasion, we're looking at 20 to 30. My phone buzzed, a text from Emily. Mom, urgent, check your email. The IRS had frozen Mark's accounts. All of them. Agent Martinez had moved faster than expected, triggered by what they called suspicious international wire activity. Mark's attempt to move money to Singapore had set off every red flag in the federal system. He's going to panic, Margaret predicted. Desperate men make mistakes. She was right. Within hours, Mark was at the house, pounding on the door I'd had rekeyed. Sarah, I know you're in there. This is still my house. I called 911, reporting a violation of the restraining order I'd quietly obtained. The police arrived as Mark was trying to break in through the garage. Our neighbor, Judge Harrison, watched from his driveway as they arrested Mark for criminal trespass and violation of a protective order. The local news picked it up. Real estate CEO arrested at former home. The footage of Mark in handcuffs, screaming about his rights, went viral within hours. That evening, Robert called. The board held an emergency meeting. Mark's been suspended pending investigation. The FBI raided his office this afternoon. 3 women had come forward publicly: Jennifer, Sandra, and Amy, via video link from Singapore. The story exploded. CEO accused of sexual harassment, tax evasion, and HIPAA violations. Your husband thought he was playing chess, Margaret said, watching the news coverage. He didn't realize you'd already won 3 moves ago. We're approaching the courtroom showdown that would determine everything. But before we get there, if you're finding strength in Sarah's story of preparation and justice, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Every week, I share stories of people who refused to be victims and fought back with intelligence and preparation. Comment below with a "if you believe in karma," or share your own story of overcoming betrayal. Your voice matters here. Now, let me take you into that courtroom where 25 years of marriage would face final judgment. January 15th, 2025. The divorce trial was set for January 20th, ironically, our 26th wedding anniversary. Margaret ran through my testimony one final time in her office, every answer practiced, but not rehearsed. Remember, she said, you're not trying to destroy him. You're seeking fair distribution of marital assets and protecting yourself from financial fraud. Let the evidence do the destroying. The witness list was impressive. Jennifer Walsh and Sandra Martinez would testify via video link. Agent Martinez from the IRS would present evidence of tax evasion. Jessica Rivera, now 6 months pregnant, had agreed to testify about the financial fraud she'd witnessed. But the star witness would be someone unexpected. Sarah Thompson, Mark's own mother. I raised him better than this, Eleanor had told me when she agreed to testify. His father would be ashamed. You deserve justice, Sarah, and I'll make sure you get it. The media attention was intense. The prenup that could cost millions ran in the Wall Street Journal. From housewife to hero, featured in the New York Times. Mark's company stock had dropped 40%. 2 former clients had already filed lawsuits against Mark's company for breach of fiduciary duty. The Singapore investors were demanding their money back. The empire he'd built on my invisible labor was crumbling. There's something else, Margaret said the night before trial. David Sterling withdrew as Mark's counsel. Conflict of interest. Turns out he's been having an affair with Amy from Singapore, another of Mark's mistresses. Mark's new attorney was a public defender, the only one who would take his case given the frozen assets. He's alone, I realized. Completely, Margaret confirmed. His brother won't speak to him. His mother is testifying against him. Even Jessica has turned. You won, Sarah. Tomorrow is just the victory lap. The morning of January 19th, my phone rang at 3 a.m. Mark, calling from a number I didn't recognize. Sarah, please. We can work this out without court. I'll give you everything. The house, the cars, 10 million cash. Just drop the criminal charges. I didn't file criminal charges, Mark. The FBI and IRS did that on their own. You vindictive bitch. The mask finally slipped completely. You planned this? You and that lesbian lawyer of yours? I hung up and called Margaret immediately. She had me forward the recording from my phone's automatic system. Witness tampering, she said gleefully. He just added another charge. By sunrise, Mark had called 17 times, each message more unhinged. In one, he was sobbing. In another, threatening to disappear to a non-extradition country. The last one was pure rage, promising to destroy me even if it took the rest of his life. That afternoon, Jessica called. He came to my apartment. Security wouldn't let him up, but he stood outside screaming that I ruined his life. The police arrested him again. 2 arrests in 1 month. The man who'd once addressed Congress about business ethics was now facing multiple criminal charges. Emily found me in the kitchen that evening, stress baking my 4th batch of cookies. Mom, are you okay? I spent 25 years with a stranger, I said. I knew he was arrogant, dismissive, selfish. But this level of cruelty, this desperation, I never saw this coming. You couldn't have, Emily said firmly. He hid it from everyone, but tomorrow everyone will see who he really is. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. I'll see you in court tomorrow, wearing my pearls, the ones from my divorce. Stay strong. Jessica arrived at my house at 8 p.m. the night before trial. She wasn't alone. Sandra Martinez and Jennifer Walsh were with her. 3 women, 3 different stories, same predator. We wanted you to know, Jennifer said. We're all testifying tomorrow, not just about the harassment, but about what he said about you. They showed me text messages I'd never seen. Mark describing me as dead weight, mentally unstable. So stupid she thinks Cayman Islands is just for vacations. Years of messages to multiple women, each one painting me as pathetic while he played the suffering hero. He told me you hadn't slept together in 5 years, Sandra said quietly, that you were basically roommates. A lie. We'd been intimate just 2 weeks before I found those first messages. He'd held me afterwards and said he loved me. There's a group chat, Jessica revealed, pulling up her phone. Mark's mistakes. That's what we call ourselves. There are 12 of us now. Amy from Singapore, Lisa from accounting, Maria, the interior designer who did your house, Rebecca from... Maria? I interrupted. She was in my home. We had lunch together. While she was sleeping with your husband, Jessica said bluntly. She's testifying via video tomorrow. She has receipts showing Mark bought her a condo using company funds disguised as design consultancy fees. 12 women, 12 affairs over our marriage, possibly more. Why? I asked, though I wasn't sure who I was asking. Because he could, Jennifer said simply. Because you trusted him and he saw that as weakness. Because every time you forgave his coldness, his dismissiveness, his cruelty, he took it as permission to do worse. They left me with a USB drive containing everything: messages, photos, recordings, evidence of a serial predator who happened to be my husband. I couldn't sleep. 25 years of marriage would be dissected in public tomorrow, our failures laid bare for strangers to judge. I walked through the house at 2 a.m., touching things Mark would never touch again. The kitchen island where he'd proposed, the couch where we'd conceived Emily, the dining table where he'd announced his betrayal. My children arrived at dawn. Emily with coffee and case files, Michael with bagels nobody would eat, David with a fierce hug that said everything. They'd taken the day off to support me. My 3 greatest achievements sitting at the kitchen table where their father had eaten thousands of meals I'd prepared. Whatever happens today, Emily said, we're proud of you. You could have let him walk away, taken whatever he offered. Instead, you're standing up for every woman he's hurt. And for yourself, Michael added. Finally, Margaret called at 7 a.m. Judge Patricia Williams just disclosed that she knows Mark professionally. They served on a charity board together. She's offered to recuse herself, but Mark's public defender didn't object, so neither did I. Patricia Williams has a reputation for despising financial fraud and protecting prenups. This is good for us. I dressed carefully, the navy suit I'd bought with my own money before I met Mark, pearl earrings from my grandmother, the watch my father gave me when I graduated college. Nothing Mark had touched, nothing from our marriage. As we drove to the courthouse, I saw news vans already assembled. High-profile divorce trial begins today. They had no idea what was coming. Eleanor stood at the courthouse steps, dignified in her vintage Chanel suit. You were the daughter I never had, she said, taking my arm. Today I'm choosing you over my son. He needs to face what he's become. Tomorrow, everything changes, I whispered to myself. The courtroom was packed, financial journalists, Mark's former clients, colleagues from both our pasts. In the back row sat the CEO of Mark's biggest competitor, probably calculating how to poach his clients. The court reporter, my brother Tom had pulled strings to be assigned, positioned his equipment carefully. Judge Patricia Williams entered, her presence immediately commanding respect. This is the matter of Thompson versus Thompson, case number 2024, DV 8974. We're here for the dissolution of marriage and division of assets. Mark looked terrible. His public defender's cheap suit emphasized how far he'd fallen. The man who once wore custom Armani now fidgeted in polyester, his hands shaking as he poured water. Your Honor, Mark's attorney began. We'd like to request a closed courtroom due to the sensitive nature. Denied, Judge Williams cut him off. This is a civil matter. The courtroom remains open unless you can demonstrate immediate danger to any party. Margaret stood, immaculate in her power suit. Your Honor, we'd like to begin by entering the prenuptial agreement into evidence. Objection, Mark's lawyer scrambled. That document is 26 years old and signed under duress. Do you have evidence of duress? Judge Williams asked. Well, no, but... Then sit down. Ms. Smith, continue. Margaret presented the prenup with theatrical precision. This agreement, drafted by Richardson and Associates, signed January 15, 1999, clearly states that in the event of infidelity, the unfaithful party forfeits 70% of marital assets. That's unconscionable, Mark burst out. Judge Williams's gavel cracked. Mr. Thompson, you'll remain silent unless questioned. One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. The CEO in the back row was typing furiously on his phone. The Wall Street Journal reporter was sketching the scene. Mark's empire was collapsing in real time, and everyone wanted to witness it. Mark's attorney, visibly sweating, attempted to paint me as a gold digger who'd contributed nothing to the marriage. Mrs. Thompson hasn't worked in 25 years, Your Honor. She's been living off my client's success while— Objection, Margaret interrupted calmly. Mrs. Thompson's contributions to the marriage are well documented. She managed the household, raised 3 children, and hosted countless business dinners that directly led to Mr. Thompson's business success. Sustained. Counselor, do you have actual evidence of your claims? The public defender shuffled papers nervously. Mr. Thompson built his company from nothing. While married, Margaret interjected, making it a marital asset under New York law. Mark's attorney tried another angle. The alleged infidelity is unproven. These could be business relationships. Margaret smiled. It was terrifying. Your Honor, I'd like to play Exhibit B. The courtroom heard Mark's voice, crystal clear. She's just a stupid housewife. 25 years and she still thinks I'm working late. Jessica understands what I need. Sarah just cooks and cleans. Eleanor made an audible sound of disgust. Several people in the gallery shook their heads. That's taken out of context, Mark shouted. What context? Judge Williams asked coldly. Makes calling your wife of 25 years stupid acceptable? Mark's lawyer tried one last desperate move. Your Honor, Mrs. Thompson has a history of mental illness. She was institutionalized for— Objection! Margaret's voice cracked like a whip. Mr. Thompson illegally obtained those medical records through bribery. We have evidence. Approach, Judge Williams commanded. The sidebar was brief. When they returned, the judge looked furious. The jury will disregard any mention of Mrs. Thompson's medical history. Mr. Thompson, you may be facing additional criminal charges for HIPAA violations. The courtroom buzzed. Mark slumped in his chair, defeat written across his face. Your Honor, Margaret announced, we'd like to call our forensic accountant to present evidence of hidden assets. Emily took the stand, professional and composed. My daughter, destroying her father with spreadsheets and precision. Can you describe what you found in Mr. Thompson's financial records? 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands totaling $8.5 million, Emily stated clearly. Wire transfers disguised as business expenses, routed through shell companies in Delaware and Nevada. Classic tax evasion structure. She presented each transaction on the courtroom screens, highlighted and annotated. The IRS agent in the gallery took constant notes. Additionally, Emily continued, Mr. Thompson paid Jessica Rivera $30,000 monthly as a consultant while she performed no actual work. This constitutes embezzlement of company funds. That's a lie, Mark erupted. Judge Williams's gavel came down hard. Mr. Thompson, you're in contempt. Bailiff, remove him to holding. He can watch the rest via video link. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Mark was handcuffed and led away, cursing and threatening everyone. With Mark gone, the atmosphere shifted. Margaret presented the prenup's authentication, the recording of Mark discussing hiding assets, the evidence of multiple affairs spanning years. Your Honor, Margaret said, the prenuptial agreement is clear. Infidelity results in forfeiture of 70% of marital assets. But given Mr. Thompson's attempts to hide assets and commit fraud, we invoke Clause 12, Section 8B, complete forfeiture of marital property rights. The public defender, now alone at his table, raised a weak objection. That's excessive. Your client signed this agreement freely, Judge Williams responded. He was represented by counsel. The terms are clear and legal. Is there anything else? The defender shook his head, defeated. He'd probably never had a case implode this spectacularly. The witnesses came one after another, each testimony another nail in Mark's coffin. Jennifer Walsh testified via video. He promised me promotions for sexual favors. When I refused, he made my work life hell. He called Sarah pathetic and useless constantly. Sandra Martinez. He said his wife was too stupid to notice the affairs. He laughed about it. Then Jessica Rivera took the stand, visibly pregnant, tissue in hand. Mark told me Sarah was mentally unstable, that she'd tried to hurt herself, that he stayed to protect the children. All lies. He used company money for our relationship, filed false expense reports. I have the receipts. She produced everything. Emails, texts, financial documents. The prosecutor in the gallery was writing furiously. But the most devastating testimony came from Eleanor Thompson. That woman, she pointed at me, gave up her career for my son. She raised my grandchildren alone while he built his empire. She made him look respectable, stable, worthy of trust. Without Sarah, Mark would still be selling starter homes and living in his car. Mrs. Thompson, Margaret asked gently, do you believe your son was faithful to his marriage vows? No, Eleanor said firmly. I've known about his affairs for years. I begged him to stop, to appreciate what he had. He laughed at me, said Sarah would never leave because she had nowhere to go. The courtroom was silent, except for the court reporter's keys. Do you believe Sarah deserves the protection of the prenuptial agreement? Eleanor looked directly at the camera, feeding to Mark in holding. She deserves every penny and more. My son became a monster, and Sarah survived him with grace. Give her everything. Agent Martinez from the IRS was the final witness, confirming the tax evasion, the criminal investigation, the frozen assets. Judge Patricia Williams called a 30-minute recess to review the evidence. The courtroom buzzed with speculation, journalists rushing to file updates. I sat with my children and Eleanor, holding hands, waiting. When Judge Williams returned, her expression was granite. I've presided over hundreds of divorce cases, she began. Rarely have I seen such clear evidence of systematic betrayal, financial fraud, and complete disregard for marital vows. She looked directly at the camera, feeding to Mark in holding. Mr. Thompson, you entered into a prenuptial agreement that clearly outlined the consequences of infidelity. You signed it willingly with legal representation. For 26 years, that document has been legally binding. The evidence presented shows not just infidelity, but multiple affairs spanning years. You've hidden assets, committed tax evasion, embezzled company funds, and attempted to bribe hospital staff for protected medical information. She turned to me. Mrs. Thompson, you've conducted yourself with dignity throughout these proceedings. Your contributions to this marriage, raising 3 children, managing a household, supporting your husband's career, have clear value that Mr. Thompson chose to dismiss. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court. The room held its breath. First, the prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. Due to Mr. Thompson's infidelity, 70% of marital assets are awarded to Mrs. Thompson. Second, due to Mr. Thompson's attempts to hide assets and commit fraud, as outlined in Clause 12, Section 8B of the prenuptial agreement, he forfeits all rights to marital property. 100% of marital assets are awarded to Mrs. Thompson. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. This includes the family home, all investment accounts, the retirement funds, and Mr. Thompson's shares in Thompson Real Estate Holdings, valued at approximately $42 million. Furthermore, Mr. Thompson will pay spousal support of $50,000 monthly for the remainder of Mrs. Thompson's life, adjusted annually for inflation. Mr. Thompson, your contempt for your wife's contributions is exceeded only by your contempt for the law. I'm recommending the prosecutor pursue all criminal charges, including tax evasion, wire fraud, embezzlement, and HIPAA violations. She banged her gavel. This marriage is dissolved. Mrs. Thompson, you're free. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Eleanor hugged me, crying. My children surrounded me with tears of relief. From the holding cell video, we could hear Mark screaming. The courthouse steps were chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Margaret and my children formed a protective circle as we pushed through. Sarah, how does it feel to win $42 million? Will you press additional charges? What's your message to other women? I stopped at Margaret's signal, turning to face the cameras. 25 years ago, I gave up my career to support my husband's dreams. Today, the law recognized that sacrifice has value. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. Behind us, Mark was being escorted to a police vehicle, still in handcuffs from his contempt charge. The photo would make every newspaper's front page. Fallen CEO loses everything. My phone exploded with messages. The board of Thompson Real Estate Holdings had called an emergency meeting. As the new majority shareholder, I now controlled Mark's company. Mrs. Thompson? A young woman approached nervously. I'm Rebecca Chen from accounting. We worked together at Morrison Marketing in 1998. I just wanted to say, we all knew you were brilliant back then. Mark didn't deserve you. Inside Margaret's car, Eleanor was on her phone with her attorney. I'm writing Mark out of my will immediately. Everything goes to Sarah and the grandchildren. At the office building, security guards who'd ignored me for years suddenly called me Mrs. Thompson with reverence. The board was waiting in the conference room, their faces carefully neutral. Gentlemen, I said, taking Mark's former seat at the head of the table. Let's discuss the company's future. Robert, Mark's brother, spoke first. Sarah, we've already drafted his termination papers. The board unanimously agrees. Mark can never return. The vote was swift. Mark Thompson, terminated for cause, effective immediately. His executive assistant, not Jessica, she'd been fired weeks ago, would clean out his office. The next morning, Margaret's office felt different, victorious. She slid a folder across her desk with a satisfied smile. The transfers are complete. Every penny is now in your name. The numbers were staggering. The house, $3.5 million. Investment accounts, $18 million. Thompson Real Estate Holdings shares, $15 million. Retirement funds, $4 million. Offshore accounts, recovered, $8.5 million. Cash and other assets, $3 million total, $52 million more than even we'd calculated due to hidden investments Emily discovered during the trial. Mark's personal accounts contained exactly 1,147, Margaret added with dark humor. His credit cards are maxed, and he owes his criminal lawyer $50,000 he can't pay. The IRS had moved quickly. Agent Martinez called personally. Mrs. Thompson, we're pursuing criminal charges. Mark faces up to $2 million in penalties plus potential prison time. You'll receive a finder's fee for the offshore accounts, approximately $850,000. Emily had prepared a financial plan. Mom, you're set for life. The monthly spousal support alone is more than most people's annual salary, and as CEO of Thompson Holdings, you'll draw a $500,000 salary. I don't want to be CEO, I said. I want to appoint someone competent and focus on the foundation. The Sarah Thompson Foundation for Women's Financial Independence. I'd been planning it since December, using $10 million of my settlement to help women escape financial abuse. Mark's penthouse was being foreclosed, his Porsche repossessed. The country club had revoked his membership after the trial coverage. His entire world, built on my invisible labor, had evaporated in one afternoon. There's one more thing, Margaret said. Jessica Rivera is suing Mark for child support and emotional distress. So are Sandra Martinez and 2 other women. He'll be in court for years. The social fallout was swift and brutal. Mark's LinkedIn profile disappeared overnight. His country club buddies wouldn't return his calls. The charity boards he'd served on issued statements distancing themselves from him. David Sterling, his former attorney, was under investigation for ethics violations after his affair with Amy was exposed. The legal community was calling it the Thompson effect, the complete destruction of everyone in Mark's orbit. Jessica called me a week after the trial. He's been staying in a motel in Jersey. He showed up at my apartment again, begging for money. I'm scared, Sarah. I helped her get a restraining order and connected her with Margaret's colleague, who specialized in custody cases. Despite everything, I felt sorry for her, 28, pregnant, and learning the man she'd trusted was a serial predator. The criminal investigations were expanding. The FBI had found evidence of bribery in his Chinese deals. The SEC was investigating insider trading, New York State was pursuing charges for the HIPAA violations. Mark faced potential decades in prison. He called me, Eleanor told me over tea, begging for money for a lawyer. I told him I'd already given him everything. My love, my trust, my respect. He squandered it all. Our children had gone no contact with their father. Emily changed her LinkedIn name to Emily Sarah Thompson, removing her father's name. Michael posted on Facebook, "Proud son of Sarah Thompson, the strongest woman I know." The media coverage was relentless. The prenup heard round the world. How a housewife brought down a CEO. The $42 million divorce. Women reached out daily with their own stories. My inbox flooded with messages from wives discovering affairs, finding hidden assets, fighting for their worth. I'd become an accidental symbol of justice. 6 months after the trial, I enrolled at Columbia Law School. At 49, I was hardly the oldest student, but I was certainly the most recognized. My professors used Thompson versus Thompson as a case study in family law. The Sarah Thompson Foundation had already helped 50 women secure divorces, find housing, and gain financial independence. We provided free legal consultation, forensic accounting, and emergency funds. Margaret served on the board, along with Eleanor and, surprisingly, Jessica Rivera, who'd become a fierce advocate for women escaping manipulative relationships. I bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, smaller than the mansion, but entirely mine. Every morning, I woke up without checking if Mark was annoyed. Every evening, I ate what I wanted when I wanted. The freedom was intoxicating. "You look 10 years younger," Maria observed when we met for lunch. My former friend, now working at the foundation, had apologized tearfully for her role in Mark's deceptions. "I was weak," she'd said. "You were kind to me and I betrayed you. Let me make it right." Mark's trial began in September. 23 charges, including tax evasion, wire fraud, embezzlement, and HIPAA violations. He'd aged 20 years and 8 months, gray, gaunt, defeated. His public defender looked exhausted. I testified for the prosecution, calmly recounting the financial abuse, the hidden assets, the systematic devaluation of my contributions. When asked if I wanted to address Mark directly, I declined. He's not worth my words anymore. The verdict came in October, guilty on all counts. 15 years federal prison, minimum, $5 million in fines he couldn't pay, permanent ban from serving as a corporate officer. As they led him away in shackles, Mark looked at me one last time. I didn't look back. I had a foundation board meeting to attend. January 20th, 2026. What would have been our yacht anniversary? Instead, I stood at the podium at Columbia Law School delivering the keynote speech for their Women in Law Symposium. "A year ago, I was told I contributed nothing to my marriage," I began. "Today, I run a foundation that's helped 500 women reclaim their financial independence. I'm a second-year law student with a 4.0 GPA. I serve on 3 corporate boards. Turns out I contribute quite a lot when given the chance." The audience, mostly women, some men, erupted in applause. Mark was serving his sentence at Otisville Federal Prison. I'd heard through Eleanor that he worked in the laundry, earning $0.23 an hour. He'd tried to appeal the divorce settlement, but every court rejected it. The prenup he'd forgotten about had become a cautionary tale in law schools nationwide. Emily had been promoted to partner at her firm. The youngest in their history, Michael was engaged to a wonderful woman who'd actually asked for my blessing, not Mark's. David had started a nonprofit teaching financial literacy to high school students. I saw Mark's former secretary at Starbucks, Eleanor mentioned after the speech. "Jessica had her baby, a girl. She named her Sarah after you. Said you saved their lives." The irony wasn't lost on me, the mistress naming her child after the wife. But I'd learned that women weren't each other's enemies. Mark had been the enemy all along. Standing in my Brooklyn brownstone, surrounded by law books and case files, I reflected on the lessons this journey had taught me. Document everything. That credit card receipt, those text messages, the prenup gathering dust. They became my salvation. Every woman should know exactly what assets exist in her marriage and keep copies of everything. Your contribution has value, whether it's financial or not. 25 years of managing a household, raising children, and supporting a spouse's career as work. It's quantifiable, valuable work that deserves recognition and protection. Prepare in silence. Mark never knew I was building a case because I continued being the wife he expected while gathering evidence. Margaret called it strategic invisibility, using their dismissal of you as cover for your preparation. Build your network. Emily, Margaret, James Rodriguez, even Jessica eventually, each person became crucial to achieving justice. No woman wins alone. Trust your instincts. That cologne change, those late meetings, the new credit card. I knew something was wrong long before I had proof. Women's intuition isn't mystical. It's pattern recognition from years of paying attention. Most importantly, it's never too late to reclaim your life. At 48, I thought my story was over. At 50, I'm just beginning. Law school, the foundation, new relationships built on respect. The life I'm living now is fuller than anything I had during those 25 years of marriage. Never let anyone convince you that your contributions don't matter. I tell every woman who comes to the foundation. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. If you're reading this because you see yourself in my story, know this. You're not crazy, you're not overreacting, and you're definitely not alone. Maybe your husband calls you just a housewife. Maybe he's moving money you can't trace. Maybe there's new cologne, late meetings, and a password on his phone that wasn't there before. Trust those instincts. Start documenting today. Open a separate email account. Photograph financial documents. Save text messages. Record conversations where legally permitted. Build your evidence quietly, systematically. Find your Margaret Chen, a lawyer who specializes in high-asset divorce and understands financial abuse. Many offer free consultations. If you can't afford one, contact your local women's shelter or legal aid society. Know your rights. In most states, assets accumulated during marriage are marital property, regardless of whose name is on them. Your contributions as a homemaker have legal value. Prenuptial agreements can work in your favor too. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233, isn't just for physical abuse. Financial abuse is real abuse. They can connect you with resources. Don't wait for permission to protect yourself. I waited 25 years for Mark to see my value. He never did, but a judge did. The law did. Now I see it myself. Your story doesn't have to end with you being erased. You can write a new chapter, one where your contributions are recognized, your voice is heard, and your future is yours to control. You are not just anything. You are everything you need to be. Today, I'm Sarah Thompson, CEO of the Thompson Foundation, second-year law student, and mother of 3 successful adults who learned that standing up for yourself isn't vindictive. It's necessary. The woman who once apologized for existing now sits on corporate boards where my opinion shapes million-dollar decisions. The stupid housewife maintains a 4.0 GPA while managing a foundation that's helped over 500 women escape financial abuse. I'm 50 years old, single, and happier than I ever was as Mrs. Mark Thompson. I wake up without anxiety, go to bed without defending my worth, and spend my days building something that matters. Mark's empire, built on my invisible labor, is gone. Mine, built on truth and justice, grows stronger every day. The foundation has expanded to 5 cities. We've helped women recover over $30 million in hidden assets. 3 law schools use our cases in their curriculum. Sometimes I pass the restaurant where Mark proposed 27 years ago. I don't feel sad or nostalgic. I feel proud of the woman who said yes back then. She did her best with what she knew. And I feel prouder of the woman who finally said, enough. The best revenge isn't living well, it's living free. Free from someone else's definition of your worth. Free from apologizing for taking up space. Free to be exactly who you are, not who someone needs you to be. My story isn't unique. Every day, women discover their worth despite someone's inability to see it. We rise, we rebuild, and we reclaim our lives. And we never apologize for it again. Thank you for joining me on Sarah's journey from betrayal to triumph. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. I share empowering stories every week. Comment below with your thoughts or share your own experience of standing up for yourself. Remember, preparation and documentation are your best weapons against injustice. Check the description for resources on legal aid and support groups. Your story matters, your contributions have value, and you deserve to be seen and heard. Until next time, know your worth and never settle for less. You are not alone in this fight.